Welcome to part 2 of the Media on the Brain seminar. By beholding, we become slaves to the high priests of a new religious order. This is one of my favorite presentations to do. I used to teach U.S. history, government, and economics. And when I taught in these areas, I would challenge the young people with the idea that the media culture and the advertising industry does not necessarily have your best interest at heart, to put it mildly. I enjoyed talking about and teaching and learning about how power works, how elites throughout history have managed societies. And you'll see some of that in this seminar today. You'll find that a lot of the things in this session actually, you don't even necessarily need to have a particular religious conviction about. As a free-thinking, autonomous human being, you might object very much to some of the things that you're going to hear about how manipulation takes place in a society. But before saying anything more, let's ask the Lord to guide our thoughts in this matter of analyzing these things. Father, we thank you again so much for this time to be together, to think about your will for us. Lord, we know that the devil is prowling around as a lion seeking whom he may devour. And he has many human agents at his disposal. And much of this is taking place in the media. We ask for discernment that we might know which areas are safe for us spiritually, which areas in this world we can seek you and escape from the traps of the devil. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to introduce you to one of my favorite individuals to study in American history. Not because I think he's a great guy. In fact, Edward Bernays, he is great in his influence, but he is the founder of modern advertising. So if you want to blame somebody for why we have advertising today and in public relations and this whole media culture of manipulating the minds of the masses, Edward Bernays is the one that started it all in America. He was an Austrian-American fellow, actually a nephew of Sigmund Freud. So he really knew how the human mind operates. As the grandfather of public relations in America today, 100 years ago nearly, he had tremendous amounts of influence in these areas of shaping public opinion. For example, he worked in propaganda for the United States government in World War I and actually wrote what became the textbook for Nazi propaganda in World War II. During his time in America, he was hired by the cigarette companies in one case. This is just an anecdotal story to give you the kind of influence this man had, give you a sense of it. The cigarette companies said, we want women to smoke in America because we could sell a lot more cigarettes if women would start smoking too, in addition to men. So they hired Edward Bernays. Mr. Bernays, we know that you are a master of the public mind. Please come to us and show us how we can get women to smoke. He put his genius mind to it and he said, I've got it. What he did was he hired the suffragettes. These were the women that marched for the women's right to vote. Very well-admired group of people standing for liberty and good things, women's right to vote. Not everybody liked them, but a lot of women in America looked up to them. Edward Bernays said, I'm going to take these women, hire them to put one of your cigarettes in the cuff of their blouse. So he takes the cigarette, gives it to the women, and they say, okay, what do we do with these? Well, when you get to the climax of your parade, this is what I want you to do. He told them what to do. The women are marching, suffragettes, right to vote, 19th Amendment. It wasn't called that yet, but at the end of the parade, they take out the cigarette. They light it, they smoke it, and just as Edward Bernays told them to do, they stand like this with their cigarette, and they shout, "Torches of freedom!" Think about this image. What does this look like? A torch being held up by a woman like this. This is Lady Liberty. He's now associated in the public mind women smoking with the true ideals of American liberty and the women's right to vote. He's got celebrities up there smoking as women. Women now can feel liberated. It's an American thing to do. It's a popular thing to do. And women started smoking in America. Edward Bernays is also known very famously for being the one behind the campaign to put bacon and eggs together for breakfast. The reason Americans believe bacon and eggs go together is because of his advertising campaigns. Immense power that he had all the way back in the 1920s. He wrote a book called Propaganda, actually charting and explaining what kind of influence and power that the media elite have, that these advertisers have over the minds of the masses. I want to give you a few quotations from Edward Bernays in his book, Propaganda. He said, if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it? Well, that sounds a little creepy. Yes, we, he said, can regiment the masses if we understand how the group mind works according to our will, and they won't even know about it. He goes on speaking of the conscious and intelligent manipulation. That's an important word. I used that word earlier. That's actually from Edward Bernays. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. Now that's a chilling statement coming from the founder of modern public relations. He says that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of our habits and our opinions, that our minds have been molded, our tastes have been formed, our ideas have been suggested by people we've never even heard of. Madison Avenue, the media elite, if you will. There's one more quotation I want to share from Edward Bernays about the power that they have. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental process and the social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. Even in our ethical thinking, our social conduct, how we do business, politics, all of it, the wires of our minds are very much being pulled by these people who understand the public mind, who understand how the group mind works. Now, is he overstating his case? Let's take a look. I think he's understating it, because given the fact of the tools he had back then in the 1920s when this book was written, his book was called Propaganda. Today, the media elite have multi-billion-dollar, high-tech, 21st century mass manipulation tools at their disposal. If he could say that 100 years ago nearly, how much more power do they have today? But many Americans, we kind of get in denial. We're a bit naive. We say, I'm an American. I have freedom. How can you say that there is such control over me? We have a free press. We have freedom in America. And I would say, according to one philosopher who wrote the following, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Because it may be true, and it is true, that to a great degree we have external political freedom in America and in Canada. To a great degree, we have a lot of freedom here in North America. But the question is not about your religious freedom and your right to vote. The question is your mind free? We want to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. I was listening to my favorite material possession, my iPod, second only to my own personal Bible, which has my notes in it. But I love the iPod because I can put my Bible right on there. Many people would be their iPhone. You can listen to the Bible as you go about your business. You can listen to sermons, conferences, books. I was listening to a book called Mind, Character, and Personality as I was walking at a beautiful camp in northern Michigan. And I came across a statement that absolutely shocked me. This again was from an author from the 19th century. I love listening and reading things from the past. People had insight back then that we just don't have today. And in this book, this following quotation was stated. And I had to pause my iPod and listen to it again. I was like, wait a minute, what did they just say? Through the channel of mesmerism, and that's another word for hypnotism, Satan comes more directly to the people of this generation and works with that power, which is to characterize his efforts near the close of probation. Now, close of probation is language that you don't hear thrown around that much today. The probationary time is the time period that we have until the very end of time, and then Jesus will come. So it's basically the time we have to make a decision for or against Christ in these last days and to share the message of the gospel, the everlasting gospel. So what this quote is saying is near the end of that time. So I believe that's right now. I believe we're in the last days right now. Near the end of that time, Satan will use mesmerism. So I'm going, that's an interesting prediction. Is it possible that Satan is using hypnotism today for his ends? And by the way, why would it be Satan's methods? Why don't we have evangelists get up before large groups of people and use hypnotic methods to get them to accept the gospel? Well, of course, we don't do that because hypnotism doesn't run around the person's reason and self-control and their own autonomy. The method of hypnotism is a brainwashing, manipulative technique that doesn't allow the person freedom of choice. And so that would be one of Satan's methods, not one of God's. Now, is it possible, I asked, I wanted to know how they do hypnotism today. You remember in the olden days, they'd swing a watch in front of your eyes, right? They don't do it that way anymore. Today, according to the use of light and sound technology with hypnosis, according to Dr. Stephen Freitag, today light and sound do the work for deep relaxation in a fraction of time of traditional methods by using specific frequencies of audio and visual input. So we use light and sound. We use a frequency of light to get somebody under a hypnotic trance. Satan will use hypnotism near the close of probation. Well, now I don't know a lot of people that go to a hypnotist. I don't know hardly anybody that goes to a hypnotist. I know a lot of people, though, that are being induced into an altered state of consciousness by a flashing frequency of light. And what is that? If you drive down the road on a dark evening in the winter and you see this blue glow in the living room of the homes of America, this flashing screen, what is that? That is the television. Now, don't believe that the television is hypnotic because a clever graphic artist on the internet put together that graphic. Let's take a look at the brain and see if we can make sense of this and confirm whether this is true or not. I want to talk about different brainwave patterns that you can be in, states of consciousness, if you will. If you're in beta, what's called beta waves, that means that your brain waves are in high frequency. It means that your brain is on. You're really thinking. You've got your critical thinking going. You've got your moral filter up. You're exercising self-control. Those are called beta waves. Now, you can also slip down into a more relaxed state of mind, and that's called an alpha wave pattern, where if you're entering into, say, New Age meditation, you're going to hum like this, you're getting into this very relaxed mindset. That is a highly suggestible, dreamy, hypnotic state of mind, according to the science. Now, if you read in the Journal of Cognitive Liberty the following, you'll see how television can actually get you down into these alpha waves out of your beta waves. Psychophysiologist Thomas Mulholland found that after just 30 seconds of watching television, the brain begins to produce alpha waves, which indicates torpid, almost comatose rates of activity. Alpha brain waves are associated with unfocused, overly receptive, there's an important word, states of consciousness. A high-frequency alpha wave does not normally occur when the eyes are open. In fact, Mulholland's research implies that watching television is neurologically analogous to staring at a blank wall. I should note that the goal of hypnotists is to induce slow brainwave states. Alpha waves are present during the light hypnotic state used by hypnotherapists for suggestion therapy. So you just heard it. When you're watching television, within 30 seconds, you go from beta down into alpha and you're undergoing suggestion therapy. You're in a highly receptive state of consciousness. And the reason it does this, by the way, have you ever watched somebody watch TV? Now that's entertaining right there. Walk into a room where somebody's watching TV, especially a dark room, you'll notice it. And let's say the TV's here, the wall is here, and their couch is here. So they're vegged out on watching the TV. The first thing you'll notice is on the wall behind them, what's happening? There's a flash. About every 3 seconds, there's a flash. And what is that flash from? Well, if you come and look at the television, you'll notice that, say, they're watching a TV show and a guy, gets out of the car. The camera shows the door close. Then the camera shows the guy's face. Then the camera shows the guy walking this way toward the door. Then a different angle shows the hand going like this. And literally every 3 seconds on average in theatrical style television, there is a frame of reference change. So it's rapidly paced like Dr. Christakis talked about. So then, he knocks on the door, then the camera shows the dog, then the one guy's talking, then the other guy's talking, then the one guy's talking. They keep the dialogue very quick. This is not the same in documentaries. In a documentary, the guy has a thought that takes him 20 seconds to express. Or say you're watching a sermon or the Media on the Brain DVDs. There's not a rapid frame of reference change every 3 seconds constantly doing that. Plus, with a documentary or a seminar or a sermon like this, the frontal lobe is being activated, the beta waves are being turned on because the information is frontal lobe in nature rather than being limbic in nature and inducing emotional reactions. So all of that from last session coming back into this session, the rapid frame of reference changing is what is turning the frontal lobe off and getting you into this alpha trance. Now, this is kind of funny. My wife and I told you, used to watch TV, and we would be sitting there, especially during the advertisements. She would get very much into this. I knew about this before I was fully devoted to Jesus Christ and sharing the message of the gospel. And I didn't want to be messed with by the advertisers, so I would turn my eyes off the screen during the advertisements. But my wife would be sitting there. She'd just get totally zoned in during the advertisements. She'd get this look on her face. Like that. And I'd say, "Hey, honey, what do you want to have for supper?" And her response was just, "Nobody's home." She didn't even hear me. And you probably know this anecdotally. Some people get totally just... It affects everybody, some people more, especially the advertisements. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. But this is the reality. When we are watching this, and this is why the Journal of Cognitive Liberty says, realizing that viewers automatically enter a trance state while watching television. You are in a trance. Marketers, that means advertisers, began designing commercials that produce unconscious emotional states or moods within the viewer. The aim of commercials is not to appeal to the rational or conscious mind, which usually dismisses advertisements, but rather to implant moods that the consumer will associate with the product when it is encountered in real life. Now, it gets even more serious because it's not just observed in the science that this is what's happening to the brain, but if you actually look at the big advertisers like Ernest Dichter, he stands right next to Edward Bernays as one of the most important in advertising history. He's the one that created the concept of a focus group. He coined the term. And he actually ran an institute called the Institute for Motivational Research. Advertisers want to know, what is it that motivates us? Is it the sex drive? Is it fear? Is it insecurity? What is it? And we can tap into that and we can get them to buy the product. Well, in 1946, he founded the Institute for Motivational Research, and a document was leaked out of this in a couple of years after that sort of described what they were doing in this institute. Take a look at this. This was a top secret document that was leaked out, and it says the training course that they're giving students is an adventure into the mental frontiers that will challenge even the most stalwart individual. You will learn how to slow thought waves and enter the alpha and others. But you get the point here. The point here is we are going to deliberately teach you how to alter states of consciousness. Why would advertisers be interested in that? Well, because they know that they can more get you to do what they want you to do if your beta waves aren't on, your critical thinking moral filter isn't up. If they can get you down and in that trance state, they can get stuff in there that will make you do things you wouldn't have otherwise done. I appreciate their honesty here. They say we're going to give you techniques that will put your newly acquired secret knowledge to work for you. Initiation into the psychological concepts and manipulative stratagems of the art course often comes as a shock to those naive individuals. 36% of all previous candidates dropped out in disgust within the first 3 days. These are squeamish types of people that aren't suited for the psychological demands of this fast-paced, secretive business. They're very honest and open when speaking to their own. Now, if you're familiar with the big controversy of the post-World War II era in the movies, it was subliminal messages. We didn't know they were doing this about the alpha waves until much later, but people were caught slipping subliminal messages into the movies to make you go buy popcorn and whatnot. And people have questioned whether that actually worked or not. The latest studies have shown absolutely that subliminal messaging has a powerful effect. There's a good documentary on this called The Home Hypnotist, put out by a great group of people called Little A Studios. You can actually get that at beltoftruthministries.com. And they've shown definitively, the studies have shown that these subliminal messages do have an effect. And I'm going to put one on the screen right now. I'm not going to cover all the territory that they've covered in that film because they've already done it. But the sexual subliminal stuff, by the way, don't study it because you'll see stuff you didn't want to see. Just a quick note on that. Don't Google subliminal messages and start getting interested in studying that. It's highly inappropriate. But I will show you the word sex. Do you see this Axe shampoo bottle? Do you see a subliminal message on there? Do you see the word sex? I was sharing this message about subliminal messages, and a student walked up to me. He said, Mr. Ritzma, look. He had gotten this bottle from his cabin. I was speaking at a camp. He said, look, a subliminal message. I thought, yeah, he's probably just making something of nothing. I'm going, whoa, it really is. I'll circle it for you. There it is. You see the S formed with the steam, and then the E and the X. Now we say, well, that's silly. Why would they do such a thing? If they can get into your subconscious something that activates limbic circuits, that shuts down frontal lobe circuits, because they're often competing like this, activates limbic circuits, it'll get you in this feeling of wanting to consume, wanting pleasure. This is what they do. And in fact, 95% of visuals, even hidden visuals, are picked up by the subconscious mind. The famous neurosurgeon Ben Carson once stated that he could put you up in front of a big church auditorium with rows and rows and rows of people with a blindfold on your eyes. Then he could take the blindfold off your eyes for 5 seconds, put the blindfold back on. And you know what is now recorded in your brain? He said the face of every single person in there, in that auditorium, is in your brain, plus what they were wearing. Now, could you consciously recall that and point it out and identify? Most of us couldn't, but there are people that have an uncanny ability to tap into those areas of the brain. They can. People that can, idiot savants, as they're called, who can be a genius in one particular area, and you're just like, how can you do that? Well, that possibility, that data is in all of our brains. 95% of all visuals are picked up, even by the subconscious mind, when you don't see them. So subliminal messages do actually have an effect. Now, my contribution to the discussion is a leaked document that I found online. This was actually mailed to Dr. Eldon Taylor many years ago, and it was published in his book, Mind Programming. I don't endorse all of this stuff in there, but this has been out and available. But I want to share it with you so that you can see what these insiders have, the way that they've talked about their advertising. This is a leaked training document, or rather a sales pitch document on how they do subliminal messaging. So it's an actual cigarette company explaining how they do subliminal messaging. For the cigarette company, rather. It's an advertising group doing it for a cigarette company. They write the following. The ad itself seems innocent enough to conscious interpretations. A couple of young lovers enjoying a quiet lakeside sunset and a cigarette. Hardly enough emotional pull for one to risk the dangers of cancer. So these advertisers are showing an ad that they've done with the cigarette company, and they're saying, you know what? To the conscious interpretation, this is really not going to get people to buy cigarettes and risk cancer. How can we get them to risk cancer? How can we get into the subconscious mind to get them to buy the cigarettes? Here they show you. They say they use a subliminal selling strategy for Kent cigarettes that has been based on a variation of our top secret hell sell theory. They say it's an emotional hook that we've cast over and over again in varying forms for a variety of clients. Religious beliefs and feelings about death stir deeper emotions than the frequently used sexual strategies. So they're going to use religious motivations. They're going to use fear. They're going to talk about that. Not so much the sexual stuff, which is frequently used, they say, but we're going to use other methods in this. The hell sell theory. What is the hell sell theory? Well, they go on and say, in today's violence-saturated world, goodness and protection or self-preservation are subconsciously sought incessantly. What we do, so what we the advertisers do, is we promise salvation and protection through product consumption from the very anxieties we instigate. So they're going to instigate some anxieties in you subconsciously. We struck emotional gold. Variations of the good versus bad strategy sell a variety of products for us as well as our competitors. So how do they do it? Well, here they show you the subliminal messages. Now, by the way, if I saw somebody on the internet pointing these things out saying, see, it's a subliminal message, I'd be highly skeptical. I wouldn't pass this along to you. But this is the actual people who produced the ad telling you, here's how we hid subliminal messages in our ad. It says, notice their joined hands. That's the image with a circle around it. And note that their hands form the silhouette of a devil's face, very similar in shape to the man's facial silhouette. So if you look at the shadow pictures above the circle picture, you see the man's head. Now you'll notice that next to the man's head is the silhouette of the joined hands. They look very similar. The point of the man's hair looks a lot like the top thumb. The nose looks a lot like the longer finger coming down. The long chin looks a lot like the other finger coming around at the bottom of the hand-holding image. So what we have here is what they call a devil's face. Now, I wouldn't have looked at that and said, I think that's a devil's face and shared it with audiences. But they're saying we're hiding a devil's face here in our image. They go on and explain how they do subliminal messaging. We have spiders here in the image. You can see them traced there in the light green tracing. Giant spiders imply usage of hidden webs and snares, being snared by Satan, being caught up in a web of death and despair, and so on and so forth. They also show that they're wearing red tops, and the color red is associated with the devil and hell in people's minds, and so that's also a fear thing. They explain how they use green in the imagery, green being associated with witches and Halloween and other scary things. Speaking of scary things, there's little demon faces hidden in the imagery there. You can see in the man's cheekbone there's a little skull-looking face and another scary-looking demon face right there in his arm. Now, why are they doing this? They go on and explain. It says, by now, it should be obvious that the viewer is in a bad situation. We've activated subconscious, instinctual, self-preservation channels to the max, all within a matter of seconds, the turning of a page. Most people would do just about anything to avoid such a hellish situation. This is where Kent Cigarettes comes in. Note the top copy of the ad stresses the word good. The word is aligned above itself 3 times. This visual emphasis on good makes it stand out and be associated with the Kent Cigarettes. By placing the viewer in a bad situation while promising them goodness with Kent, we've elevated the image of Kent from mere cancer sticks into portable packs of protection, magically endowed with soul-saving capabilities. Now, you might imagine they are overselling their strategy a little bit here, but the point is not how effective this is. The point is that they are trying to do it. So you might doubt whether this is actually having as big of effect as they claim. That's not what I'm talking about. I want you to know how advertisers, how these big-moneyed media elite think about us and how they try and attempt and use methods to manipulate. They go on, and I'll seal the deal with this quote. The true beauty of this is that the consumer actually pays to be brainwashed while we corporate fat cats laugh all the way to the bank. Now, what is the aim of advertisers? If an advertiser is trying to get you to buy something, what are they actually doing? The first thing they're doing, actually, is they want us to feel inadequate, insecure, incomplete in some way. So the first thing they're selling us is actually discontentment. They show an image of somebody who's more beautiful, somebody who's got more stuff, a guy who all the ladies like or whatever, somebody more attractive, and all of a sudden I don't feel so good about myself. I don't have that product and I'm not as happy as that guy on the screen. So we get these feelings within us of discontentment, and then they want to make you buy the product to fulfill the need that you have, the perceived need that you have. According to one advertiser in the book Youth Culture 101, we read, "We've taken a page from Satan's book," says an advertising executive. "We've taken a page from Satan's book. Find a point of weakness and lust in every man, woman, and child, and target that weakness to make them want to buy the product." Wow. Very clearly, the more media we are consuming, the more we are being advertised to, the more of this that is happening. Continuing on, the average 10-year-old is watching 50 hours of food and beverage commercials in a given year. $10 billion a year is spent by the food industry. That's $1 million an hour, every hour, all day, all night, all year. $1 million an hour being spent advertising the food industry. And of course, how many of those advertisements are for healthy, whole food sources of nutrients? Kaiser Family Foundation did a study and found that 0% of the commercials are for fruits and vegetables. And so, of course, the kids are being advertised to with every manner of unhealthy food that's going to be taking its toll upon them. Richard Winter, in the excellent book Still Bored in a Culture of Entertainment, says the following: "What does the advertising industry do to you? Its endless commercials breed in you discontent with your house, your car, your body, your clothes. In old-fashioned biblical language, it inspires you to covet. It promises you satisfaction, peace, meaning, and happiness, but only if you get your needs met now. Children learn that they are the most important person in the universe. that impulses should not be denied, that pain should not be tolerated, and that the cure for any kind of pain is a product. They learn a weird mix of dissatisfaction and entitlement. With the message of ads, we are socializing children to be self-centered, impulsive, and addictive. And if you look, they're starting at the very youngest of children. 6-month-old babies now getting an imprint in their mind of unhealthy, sugar-laden soda pop being associated with something as loving and comforting as mother's milk. That's twisted. And then they get a little older and they learn how to count. And the learning process is associated with their favorite sugary, unhealthy foods. And even entertainment, their favorite characters on cartoon shows showing up in all of the products that they so enjoy. All of these associations being built from a young age. In fact, there are advert games. If you go to the advertisements actually on the websites where they can go play games, 85% of the most heavily advertised brands for children have a website that directly targets the children, like Planet Twinkie, where you can go and play around in Planet Twinkie and eat yourself to an early but giddy grave on the process. But it's not just the advertisers. I want to transition in part 2 of the Media on the Brain seminar right now. I want to transition to also seeing that Hollywood is using very many of these same strategies and tactics. Let's go back to the topic of hypnotism. I'm going to share with you a 7-minute clip from a professional hypnotist, Mark J. Ryan, who I referred to at the beginning of the seminar. He's a professional hypnotist of 23 years. Now, I don't share Mark J. Ryan with you because I'm on the same page with him on everything. I'm not. I don't believe in using hypnotism at all. In fact, I could tell you stories from my youth experience where friends of mine got into hypnotism. It became very demonic. Hypnotism is spiritualism. It's a very dangerous thing to open your mind up in that way. But nonetheless, I have to share with you his testimony because he knows his craft. When I hear from a hypnotist what's happening in Hollywood, I know there's credibility there. But I should warn you before I hit play. He says things like, this movie that I saw was the greatest movie ever because hypnotism is healing for us. And I want you to have your beta waves going here. Have your critical thinking on. Don't take everything he says here whole, swallowing it whole, but evaluate it. And you know that we get our healing from Jesus Christ, not from hypnotism. And that this movie, if it used hypnotism, was not the best movie, but the worst movie. So let's see what happened in the movie Inception and also what's happening all throughout Hollywood. Take a listen to Mark J. Ryan.
Hi everybody, it's Mark J. Ryan, and I'm here to talk to you about an incredible movie that I saw last night, as a matter of fact, called Inception. This has to be one of the best movies, if not the best movie I've ever seen. What really excited me, though, was the amount of hypnosis and NLP that was used in that. Now, for those of you that know about hypnosis from stage hypnosis, this is a little bit different on what he was using. This movie actually used hypnotic processes, NLP processes throughout it. And what I want to do is take you through a series of short videos to tell you a little bit about how that was used in a simple manner. And then if you want to, we can advance it more into depth of this. So people that see the movie, one of the things that they talk about is the shift in the feelings they have within themselves. This movie comes to you, and as you're watching it, it is taking you through a hypnotic process. This is like 3 things, maybe 4 things that I'm going to talk about that of hundreds of things that they did in that movie. So what is the hypnotic process? How did he use hypnosis and NLP to get in there? The first thing we're going to talk about is what they call embedded metaphors. And embedded metaphors is the idea of starting to tell one story. And Milton Erickson, who was, in my opinion, the world's greatest hypnotist ever and healer using hypnosis, was a medical professional who had polio most of his life. He started off as a doctor, then went to psychiatrist, then got into hypnosis, and the rest of his life he used hypnosis because it worked so well with healing of people. And what he would do is he would start to tell a story. And partway through the story, he'd start to tell another story. And then partway through that story, he'd start to tell another story. And then partway through that one, he'd tell another story, and so on. And then within little elements, there could be offshoots of a story within a story within a story. But then he would come back. So let's imagine that you're coming down, you start a story, and you stop it. And then you continue with another story, and you continue with another story. This is a trance. U is what they call it, U trance. And what this does is the deeper as you get down here is the depth of the trance that you're going into. And what happens is when you start to tell a story and stop, and then you tell another story and stop, and then you tell another story and stop, what happens is you start to go deeper and deeper into a trance. So that part of the movie where he had all these different stories, these embedded metaphors, one in front of another in front of another, and they were all going to a culmination point of, will he get to that unconscious? Will he open that safe in time? Will he get the message? Will he get the learning at a critical time? This is where most of the work is done in hypnosis with people. We take them down into trances, and then what happens is you begin to close the loop. So the story that was over here, you finish here. The story was at that level, you finish here. The story that was at that level, you finish here, and so on all the way up. Well, that's what we do in hypnosis. We bring them to a certain level, and then we give them little reminders on the way back of the other level that we were at, and then another level that we're at, and another level until we come back out of the trance. And then we start to see the thing that happened with Sato at the end of the movie with the top. And what that does is it closes the loop and kind of creates an amnesia. You see people going up on stage and they get hypnotized and they come off and you say they were hypnotized and they're going, I wasn't hypnotized. It isn't that they don't remember at some level of their unconscious mind. Just like with dreams, when you come up out of a dream, a lot of times you remember for a little bit, but then after a few minutes you don't remember at all. Same type thing happens with this kind of amazing trance that he did, is that he starts off with a story, goes through all different kinds of stories and starts closing them up, comes up to this top one. And then what happens is it's like a seed. It closes it off and it creates an amnesia, a forgetting, so to speak, where there's certain parts of the movie, and unless you get reminded, you go, oh yeah, okay, I remember that. But at other times you don't remember because this is going down into the psyche and it gives it a chance to germinate. And we can go through a whole course of teaching how hypnosis works, how it works in the movies, how it works in TV. All Hollywood studios have people that are directing them to say, what's the best way to use this to get deep into the unconscious mind? Some are nefarious. Some are not the best ways of getting into the unconscious mind. If he does a part 2, all he's got to do is just go through a couple of those stories or a couple of the patterns of the stories, and we're going to be way deep down in a trance. So in the beginning of part 2, if he does part 2 of Inception or part 3, it gets you deeper and deeper. Again, the amount of hypnosis, blatant write-out techniques that they're using, hypnotic techniques in the movie making itself, the NLP techniques are incredible. Part of what happens is again, we go through the U-trance, but then we also have fractionation. But over in this area here, this is kind of where like the post-hypnotic suggestions happen. What is it that you want people to do? How do you want people to respond? He started talking to his wife. He started talking to his unconscious of Mal and who she was and what she needed to do. So in a sense, he was creating a post-hypnotic suggestion. Post-hypnotic suggestion is, let's say that somebody's on stage and they're doing it, let's use a hypnosis show, for instance, and they say, okay, the blue marker. Every time you see the blue marker, you'll yell out the word Inception. What happens is if you've got people in a deep enough trance is that takes effect to say that when they see this blue marker at this point here, somewhere outside of this seed, when they see the blue marker, like in the audience, all of a sudden the hypnotist will hold up the blue marker and the guy will stand up and say, Inception. He'll get up and yell, and then he'll go like, wow, why did I do that? Not only did they plant something in you in this movie that's going to start germinating, no, something wonderful. Again, a lot of the movies I've been seeing lately and a lot of TV programs, I haven't watched much TV, a few hours in probably the last 3 years because of what commercials do. Excuse me. Can't stand what commercials do in my mind, let alone in minds that have no idea. I know what they're doing and it still gets in there. Some of the other things we can talk about is how they use music, in this U-trance, and where the music was used wonderfully as an anchor. An anchor basically in NLP is a stimulus response. So the music was used beautifully throughout this to create a state, once a state was there, to pair up that music with a state. And then when you're in another place, if they paired it up, let's say right here with the stimulus and response, and all of a sudden you're down here where they know it's going to be hard, or down here where it's going to be hard to open up and get in a certain feeling, if they've done this music, stimulus and response, at all those places, and then they play it really strong and really loud at that part, all those emotions start flooding in at one time.
So music is used. Make sure to stick around for part 4. You're going to see what he talked about there. Music is used to create a state. We're going to get into that deeply, but other things that he said in there that really, really I want to highlight, very important things. Number one, he said, they planted something within you in this movie that is going to germinate. Now, people who I've spoken to and have seen this movie, at that point they go, what they planted? I don't even know them. Do I trust somebody to plant something in me hypnotically? Why would I do that anymore? Especially considering what he just told us. All Hollywood studios are using these methods. It's the most important statement in the entire video clip in my assessment. All of them have people who are advising how to get into the subconscious mind. And then he said some of them are nefarious. And he thinks some of it is good. So nefarious must be really nefarious because good is nefarious. Another thing he said was they created an amnesia. They closed the loop when they took you out of that trance, and they created this forgetting. I was speaking once to a group of people, and there was a front row filled with college students who were all fired up about this information. They're going, wow, this is really fascinating. And they were looking at each other like, whoa, we've all seen this movie. They went to lunch, talked about that, and they tried to reconstruct the plot of that movie in their minds. And they could get bits and pieces of it, but they remembered that the whole film, the whole plot was kind of fuzzy to them. It was a little bit foggy. There was a forgetting. There was an amnesia. They didn't actually remember the experience that they had undergone. Even if you could recollect the actual plot, the facts, the hypnotic experience that you went through is something that you're not going to remember with your conscious mind. That's what he explained that they do when somebody comes off the stage in Las Vegas who's been hypnotized, and they say, I wasn't hypnotized. Well, that's how hypnotized people talk. They all think they weren't hypnotized because when they bring you out of it, they don't let you remember the feeling of being hypnotized. Very, very important testimony from Mark J. Ryan to know what they are doing. It means something to me that he does not watch TV. He knows what they're doing, especially the advertisers. He says, I even know what they're doing, and it still gets in there. How much more to us who are totally naive and don't know what they're doing? These things are getting into our subconscious in a very serious way. Now, I want to share with you another man from many decades past, Bertrand Russell. He stands right next to Edward Bernays as one of the most important people to talk about in this area of the control and manipulation of society. He happened to be a British fellow, and he wrote a book called The Scientific Outlook, where he talked about how we, the elite, how we, the planners of society, can have a scientifically crafted society, a socially engineered country. He called it the scientific dictatorship. He said, we can have a dictatorship over the people in a way different than the communists do. They use, force and secret police and all sorts of terrible things, and the Nazis. He says, we can control our people through different methods than that. And his favorite method was the education system. He started by saying education should aim at destroying the free will. He says after pupils leave school, they will be incapable of thinking on their own, otherwise than what their schoolmasters would have thought for them. And he goes on and says, diet, injections, and injunctions will, from a very early age, get the kids from the various early age, bring them on up with our injunctions, with our injections, with our diet that we give them, and we will produce the sort of character in the young that any serious criticism of the powers that be will be psychologically impossible for them. He says, we can get them to believe that snow is black. He says it would be impossible for them, just like it's impossible for a herd of sheep to be able to rebel against the practice of eating sheep. And he says we're going to use methods like the Jesuits use. Very interesting. Now, that was what he said about the education system. He goes on with an even more important statement for our purposes here today. He says, perhaps the most important of all modern agents of propaganda is the cinema. Now, remember everything he just said about education. He says cinema is perhaps the most important of them all. It leads to almost worldwide uniformity. The great majority of young people in almost all civilized countries derive their ideas of love, of honor, of the way to make money, and the importance of good clothes from the evenings spent in seeing what Hollywood thinks is good for them. I doubt whether all the churches and schools combined have as much influence as the cinema on the opinions of the young. And he says this is where I got the subtitle for this presentation. The producers of Hollywood are the high priests of a new religion. He's coming from a secular point of view here. He's saying these producers of Hollywood, they are the high priests of this new secularized religion in our scientifically crafted and engineered society. They are the ones, the producers of Hollywood are the ones that can get uniformity to happen, get everybody thinking in the way that we need them to think. Whether certain clothes are important, how to make money, the meaning of love, all of these things, those values will come from the high priests of a new religion, the makers of the films. He goes on and says, the result of having everybody in this uniform way of thinking from the cinema is that any defects in the status quo become known only to those who are willing to spend their leisure time otherwise than in amusement. These are, of course, a small minority and are at most times negligible. There is, however, a certain instability about the whole system. In the event of unsuccessful war, it might break down. The system might break down. And the population, which had grown accustomed to amusement, might be driven by boredom into serious thought. Oh no! If our people start engaging in serious thought, then we won't have, our system of control will have broke down. Isn't that interesting how they talk? They want us in constant amusement. This dates all the way back to the Roman Empire. You remember bread and circuses. Keep the people entertained. Keep the people fed, and they will be tamed, and they won't be rebelling against us. That's how we can keep control over the population. Amusement. Very interesting political message, also echoed by Joseph Stalin. He said, if I could control the medium of the American motion picture, I would need nothing else to convert the entire world to communism. He knew the power of the cinema. He knew the power of Hollywood. He said, if I could have control over that, the whole world would be communist. Now let's look at some of these high priests of a new religion. Now before we actually take a look at some of them, I want to have a very important disclaimer. When I look at individuals and when I quote individuals in this seminar, our battle is not against them. Our battle is not against flesh and blood. Our battle is against the principalities and powers of this dark world. Now, I share quotations from people because they've gone public with their statements. They help us learn and understand what's happening in Hollywood. I don't share these quotations to go after these individuals. They're image bearers of God. They are beloved children of God who may be in rebellion against God, but that doesn't mean that we need to have hate toward them or think that our battle is against them and we need to wage some sort of culture war and have a political battle over this. That's not what this seminar is about at all. This seminar is about what kind of choices are we making for our families. So enough said on that. Paul Schrader, a screenwriter, stated the following: we are there to thumb our nose at your values. We don't care if you like us. We don't like you. People think that Hollywood has principles, morals, and values. It doesn't. So I appreciate Paul Schrader's honesty. I appreciate that, he told us at least what he's all about. We're thumbing our nose at your values. We don't like you. We don't have principles, morals, and values. Going on to others, David Putnam, a movie producer, said, movies are powerful, good or bad. They tinker around inside your brain. They steal up on you in the darkness of the cinema to form or conform social attitudes. In short, cinema is propaganda. Couldn't have said it better myself. Cinema is propaganda. Kevin Smith, the filmmaker, also said this: I always like to think of it as like, I've got them sitting there. Whip a little message at them. Whip a little moral at them. Whip a little of what my view of the world is, because that's what every good filmmaker does. Every filmmaker who's risen to the level of Hollywood where we are watching their movies, they're the ones that are good, that are successful. They are whipping their message, their morals at us while we're under a induced trance. And if you think about what message is it? What is the moral message that they are whipping at us? They did a study in the University of Texas and found in 1998 that almost all Hollywood writers, actors, producers, and executives do not attend religious services. They found actually 2% attended religious services on a regular basis of some kind. And most of those are probably not your religion. 2% were religious at all. Now, I should mention they are quite religious, but we'll talk about what religion that is in a minute. I want to share a Bible text with you, though. This is a very, very important text from Colossians 2:8. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy. Where is the hollow and deceptive philosophy of this world today? It's being put out through the entertainment media, and we are called to not be taken captive by it, but rather we are to take every thought captive. Now that's not possible when I'm in a alpha trance, when I'm in a hypnotic state. I can't be thinking clearly and strongly in an active frontal lobe manner. I can't be taking every thought captive. I might think I am because I'm awake and conscious, but things are getting into the subconscious that I'm not having the moral filter up to discern and to filter out. Now, I mentioned that these people are very religious. What religion are they? I want to look at a few people from many decades past, and then we'll look at some more modern individuals. This is Rudolph Valentino, Mae West, and Marilyn Monroe. These three are probably the three most important people in bursting the boundaries of everything that was considered sexually appropriate to be putting on the screen and having displayed to the American public. They all were actors in their day, putting out films that were sexually inappropriate. I want to begin with Rudolph Valentino. Where did they get the idea for his movie scripts from? Every night, Valentino's wife would hold a seance. They held a seance every night. They're very religious, calling forth help from the spirit world in her creative undertaking. Then, pencil and paper in hand, she would go into a trance and start writing. After her outpourings were typed up, they were brought to the set the next day and given to the director. So where did these early movies come from? In the very early decades, literally, they came from the demonic realm, channeling through Madame Valentino, writing the scripts. But she wasn't the only one. Mae West also received inspiration from psychic phenomenon. Her psychic recalls that she'd pace around the room, saying, "Forces, forces, come to me and help me write a script." She would begin to hear voices and images as the plot was revealed to her. She would lie in bed in a trance-like state, dictating as the spirits entered. Now, we're going to talk more about this when we look at the music industry, but it is good to know how the devil works in the occult inspiration methods. When he inspires something like movie scripts, he literally dictates it. That's different from how the prophets of the Bible write their inspired works. We know that they write differently. If you read John versus Paul, they have different writing styles, right? God inspires the prophet with thoughts, visions, dreams, ideas, and the prophet writes it in their own manner. But the devil doesn't respect human autonomy like that. They literally are channeled. And all of the master occult works of the 19th and 20th centuries, whether it's Madame Blavatsky or Aleister Crowley, who we're going to talk about in the next session, these are channeled works. Same thing with the movies. The movies were the master occult works of the 20th century, and we didn't even know it. Now, it wasn't just the old ones in the 20s and 30s, even Marilyn Monroe on to the 50s and 60s. What was her acting all about? Well, she was a very depressed person, actually, and she was known for entering into deep trances before each scene. Her psychic said the following about Marilyn Monroe. When she saw a camera, she lit up and was totally different. So she had a psychic. She was a very depressed person, would enter into a trance before each scene. Then she'd come out of the trance and be a totally different person. Now, what is going on there? Let's take a look at some other individuals, and we'll have a sense of what was happening with Marilyn Monroe. First, Lucille Ball, also in the 1950s, famous show, I Love Lucy. And we look at that show and we say, oh, it was innocent and fun. It's just funny. It's no big deal. Well, notice this scene. They had a little seance scene, a little spiritualist scene thrown into just a funny, light, innocent show. And so spiritualism is just no big deal, right? It's just for fun. It's a very big deal. You're messing with demonic things. Now, how did she make the decision to take this part and play Lucy in I Love Lucy? She had been an actor on the big screen. Why get demoted down to this TV show? Well, it was the so-called spirit of actress Carole Lombard who guided Lucille Ball into taking a chance and accepting the offer to star in I Love Lucy. The glamorous comedian who had died in an airplane crash in 1942 appeared to Lucy in 1951. Now, you know that this wasn't actually the spirit of Carole Lombard. The Bible condemns communicating with the dead. It's a demonic thing. So just enough said on that. But because Lucille Ball accepted the spirit's urging to take a chance, honey, she made television history. So the reason she decided to do this television show was because a demonic impersonation of a person who is dead instructed her on that and said, you should take a chance, honey. Let's look at some modern actors. Oprah Winfrey. She said, this is how I see acting. I use my body to be a carrier for the spirits of those who have come before me. She said, I tried to empty myself and let the spirit inhabit me. What spirit? The spirit of somebody who had gone before her. So in other words, the spirit of the dead. In other words, a demon spirit inhabiting me. Let the Spirit inhabit me. I'm a carrier for those spirits, she said. Now, what do we call that in one word biblically? It starts with the letter P. That is possession. Is that what was happening also with Marilyn Monroe? Enter into a trance, come out, and she's a totally different person. Now, it's not just these two. We also see with Peter Sellers. He said, regarding acting, it's rather like being a medium and laying yourself wide open. Laying yourself wide, it sounds like Oprah Winfrey, empty myself. And saying, I want a character to inhabit my body, or I want a character to take charge of me so that I can produce what I hope to produce. So we see a trend forming here. It's not just one actor. Peter Sellers said it too. I'm going to lay myself wide open. It's like I'm a medium and I have something else inhabit my body. Possession. Robin Williams actually used the word possession. He says there's also that thing. It is possession. And we know he's talking about literal possession because look at the next sentence. In the old days, you'd be burned for it. And that's what they did burn people at the stake for in years past, was possession in the Dark Ages. And even in America, they kill witches and so on. So he's talking about actual spiritualism. In the old days, you'd be burned for it, but there's something empowering about it. It is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where you really can become this other force. It is possession, according to Robin Williams. Denzel Washington actually describes the process of how he became possessed to act a scene. And interestingly, this scene was shown at a Christian school that I attended. And it's the movie Glory, which is a historical film. It's very educational, very informative. You learn a lot about the Civil War from this film. So just because something is educational doesn't necessarily mean it is holy. Because he describes how he acted this scene. Basically, what I did was got on my knees and sort of communicated with the spirits. And when I came out, I was in charge. Listen to these words. I couldn't have acted that. I couldn't have made a decision to play that part. So literally before the scene started, he gets on his knees, communicates with the spirits. He says, when I came out, he says, I couldn't have acted that. So what's the implication? Somebody else was acting it through him, just like these other actors. Johnny Depp stated it very bluntly. He said, I know I have demons. Now, I pause right there and I go, well, he could mean something like issues from my past or problems in my life that I have to overcome. Well, the rest of the quote makes it clear that that's not what he means. He says, I'm 30 different people sometimes. I know I have demons. I had a student that said, oh no, don't put Johnny Depp in your seminar. He's my favorite. We get attached to these people in Hollywood as if they're our friends. Same thing in the music industry. We got to think critically. We got to think objectively about what it is that we're viewing. In fact, you might say at this point, okay, I got you. I'm going to definitely stay away from Johnny Depp, Robin Williams, Denzel Washington, Oprah Winfrey, Marilyn Monroe, these other actors, because that's clearly dabbling in spiritualism if I am going to continue watching these actors, because I know that they are confirmed spiritualists. Well, we need to go a little further than that. Because if you look at the testimony of one insider, Fairuza Balk, she was the star of the witchcraft movie, The Craft. And in an interview about witchcraft, she said the following. A lot of actors, who don't mention their names, of course, are very much into this. How many actors? A lot. Now, I can't tell you the exact percentage, but I don't want to enter into a world where a lot of the people are confirmed spiritualists into witchcraft. In fact, I had a conversation with a friend who was in the acting community, knew lots of big-name people, and would talk about how everybody was into spiritualism there. You'd be up on the stage and a breeze would go by and they'd say, did you feel that? That was a spirit coming by. And they would engage in putting sage on the wall and different, Wiccan practices. And that was just the reality of that community. As confirmed by Fairuza Balk. A lot of actors who don't mention their names, of course, are very much into this. And I believe this is why Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, stated that television is the satanic family altar. Television is the area of our culture, the movie industry, Hollywood, that's just saturated with spiritualism. It's the devil's playground. He's having a field day with American families in this area. And I can tell you personal testimonies. I can tell you a half dozen friends, just friends of mine, who've told me about things that they've seen, spiritually, demonic things that they've seen because of having these movies and having this worldly stuff in their lives and in their homes. I'm going to tell you a very important story that illustrates that at the end of part 3, so stick around for that. But I do want to say this in a very, very clear and strong manner. The Bible says, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So don't be afraid. There's no fear in love. Perfect love casts out all fear. But there's also a first part of that verse that we often don't quote with the rest of it. We say, resist the devil and he will flee from you. This is from the book of James. But there is a sentence that comes before that is a modifier. It's a prerequisite for having the power to resist the devil and him flee from us. And the statement goes, submit yourselves therefore to God. So when we are living in submission to God, we can claim the promise that we will be protected from all of this demonic garbage that's happening in this fallen world that we are in. So, what do you have in your area of media and entertainment that needs to be rethought? I went through a thorough sifting and sorting a couple years ago when the Lord brought some of this knowledge to my attention. Had to ask myself some tough questions about what I was allowing into my life. But as we think about what we might do and not do, I want to close with an illustration. I want you to imagine, right here we have a buffet. I love going to buffets. My wife and I enjoy being able to just pick a little bit of a few different things and enjoy a good church potluck. So imagine your favorite buffet of food is here, and you've gone for many years to this buffet. And you've always enjoyed the food at this buffet, thinking that it was healthy and helpful and holy. But one day you go and you're about to put some things on your plate, and somebody from the restaurant comes up and taps you on the shoulder. And they say, hey, that item right there that you're putting on your plate, that's rat poison. It's got rat poison in it. You're going, what? And then he goes, yeah, that one and that one and that one too. You're not going to want to touch those. Those have rat poison in them. So you put those ones back. You're like, okay, well, there's rat poison in the buffet, but I'm a discerning Christian. I don't want to be one of those extreme people. I'm not a legalist. I'm gonna find something good at this buffet. So you're looking for something, and then somebody else taps you on the shoulder and they say, hey, I know that other guy from the restaurant told you that those 6 or so items were filled with rat poison. But actually, a lot of actors who don't mention their names, of course, are very much into this. You're going, a lot? Well, then I don't know who's safe and who's not. What do I do? What do you do? But you say, I'm going to try and stay at this buffet. Because I know Hollywood has put out something good in the past. It's not all evil. So there's something good at this buffet. I'm going to find it. So you're about to grab something else, and somebody else taps you on the shoulder named Mark J. Ryan. Mark J. Ryan says, hey, I got to tell you something. I know what's going on in the kitchen. I'm an expert on the process of producing this food. All Hollywood studios, all of them, are using hypnotic methods to enter into your subconscious. The whole buffet is filled with rat poison. And then somebody else named Kevin Smith taps you on the shoulder and he says, every good filmmaker is whipping their message and morals at you. Everyone. At this point, you're kind of upset because you love this buffet, you grew up with this buffet, you know there may have been some decent things in the past, and you don't want to be one of those people. But maybe God is calling you to be one of those people, but maybe not with the attitude that you've seen them have in the past. Maybe not a judgmental and legalistic attitude, but a rational, spiritual, spirit-led decision to say, I don't need to stay at this buffet because I know it's not a safe place to be spiritually. I know that things are happening in my subconscious mind that I can't control. And so I'm going to go and find a different buffet. There are many, many different options that the Lord has given us. I hope you stick around for part 6 of the seminar when we talk about pleasure and how God designed us to live within the true reality that He has given us. The other buffets are way better anyway. I've lived on both sides of this. And I can tell you there's way more joy, way more peace, way more identity and purpose in life when you say, I don't need to just live the life of entertainment. I don't need Hollywood in order to feel like I've got something interesting going on in my life. I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission in the last days to share the truth of God's character, to share the three angels' messages of Revelation 14, to share the everlasting gospel. And that's who I am. And I don't need to be defined by any of this. My favorite actors, whatever. My favorite people are people from history and in the history of the Bible. My favorite things that I like to talk about isn't the latest movie. It's what are we doing as a people in these last days. Let's close in prayer and let the Lord speak to your heart in this area of media. Father in heaven, we want to surrender and submit ourselves to you. We know that the devil is a roaring lion trying to devour us in many ways spiritually. Lord, we know that this area of Hollywood and advertising is an area that is trying to capture us. We want to be slaves to no man. We want to be servants of the Most High. Lord, we want to have our lives purified of anything that might be of the demonic realm. We want to have our lives fully devoted to you and to your service. Give us the strength and the courage to face this issue, to really take this on and follow whatever it is that you are asking us to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Psychologists tell us that less than half of the population are even capable of engaging in formal reasoning.
Independent thinking is such a critical life skill.
How important is it that we have good critical thinking skills?
If you don't think for yourself, somebody else will be thinking for you.
If our thinking isn't governing our behavior, somebody else's thinking is.
Is it possible that Satan will try to take away the very thing most needed for our time? Some of Satan's most successful strategies are false educational practices.
We're not hitting on the key factor that college teachers want us to learn, and that is how to think.
If you can teach them how to educate themselves, how to learn what they need to learn, then you've prepared them for any learning that they might need at any point in time in their life.
Do you want your child to be a thinker? To be a leader? To be the one who influences instead of being influenced? Parents, will you recognize your responsibility? More than that, will you accept your responsibility? You have the salvation of your children and the future of the world in your hands.
This child's soul is on the line. This child's character and his livelihood and his future. We're forming a little human being here by our actions or lack thereof.
In this seminar, I'm going to show you how we can raise a generation of young people to be strong, to think and act. An entire generation that will not be deceived. It will take a thinking generation.